Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, and today I'm going to be talking about Book 3 of Alan Moore's run of Saga of the Swamp Thing, and this book contains issues 35 through 42 of his run. And this one, I think, is the best one yet. Even better than the best moments of Book 1. And I'll get into why I think that way. But first of all, the biggest thing to talk about within this, the introduction of John Constantine. Before going into Saga of the Swamp Thing, I had known of the character of John Constantine, Hellblazer, whatever you want to call him, or if Hellblazer is a title, not really a name. I'd heard of the character of John Constantine. I had heard of the Keanu Reeves movie. I've never seen the movie, but I'd heard of it. And it wasn't until I was starting to look into potentially reading Swamp Thing that I realized, oh, I didn't know that Alan Moore was actually the one to create John Constantine. For whatever reason, I think I had thought that Neil Gaiman had created John Constantine. But anyways, I mean, Constantine is such an enigma. Just in the little bit that he's been introduced in these issues within Book 3, yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm curious to see where this will go. But this is a horrifying book in the various amalgamations of what horror can be. Right off the bat, we're getting Nuke Man, who is almost like this. I almost compare him to, and this isn't necessarily trying to compare Nuke Man to like Trash Can Man from The Stand by Stephen King, but that's one of the biggest comparisons I can make. We're just this guy who has the power to destroy so much, and he's just kind of bumbling along and seems to have just ingested all of this nuclear waste and he's insane, and he's harming Swamp Thing by touching him, and he knows that he's touching him, and he kind of gets a kick out of it, but he also wants to try to talk to Swamp Thing. He always wants to try to communicate with people, try to understand things. And then you get this young man named Wallace. I forget the other part of his name, but you get Wallace, who's kind of a minor character in this arc, as this mini arc as well, where he's kind of going from place to place, and he's just horrified at the things that are happening to these like nuclear power plants, to these this nuclear waste dumping, so the terror of kind of, and this may have been around the time of the 3 Mile Island incident. There was in kind of there are flutterings of newspapers in the issues of this, and in one of them it mentions, oh, we're now beginning the construction of 3 Mile Island. So I don't know the exact date of 3 Mile Island, but it may have been around this time, so that may have been another inspiration for Moore to write this character who I think he created. I looked up Nuke Man, tried to, things to like this character, and haven't really found any other references to him online besides this series. And so we get into that, and that is, it lasts for a few issues, and it's so bizarre and so strange. And then we start to dive into John Constantine, where there are references to Cthulhu and the people that John Constantine is interacting with. And what's fascinating to me is that while Constantine is still mysterious, he was to the readers at this time, he is to me as well, because I've never read anything else that features that character. But he almost tries to show Swamp Thing that, you can regenerate, and you can kind of degenerate your body in this place and then regenerate somewhere else in the world, and you can try to do it quickly. And then this book gets into like underwater vampires and stuff like that, which again, like it leans, the horror aspect is leaned in. We have the kind of cerebral horror from the nuclear waste and kind of destructions of nuclear power plants. We have underwater vampires, which is just kind of like a weird creature horror. But Constantine is on a mission. He's on a mission, and we kind of like he's almost trying to thwart this big cosmological battle that is coming. I think I read somewhere that this was a tie-in to the Crisis on Infinite Earths, or something along those lines, which DC was going through at the time, so that might be part of it. But I think it works so well within this world, within the types of villains and conflicts that we've seen Swamp Thing run up against. So that didn't even occur to me that this was like, maybe a little part of a broader crossover event that was going on in DC at the time. But it's good. It's always good to have that kind of context with these stories. So then just flipping through it here, so I can make sure I know for sure what I'm talking about. Yeah, and then I'm pretty sure more. I know more was kind of not necessarily a voice for LGBTQ individuals in the 80s. I know that there were a couple times where I think laws were passed in the UK that were kind of anti-gay and discriminatory laws that he published open letters against. And I think it's been noted that Moore is a strong feminist as well. I may be completely off the mark there. I don't know. But there's almost sociological horror within the last few issues that I was not expecting, because again, we're going from like underwater fish vampires to this woman who is so fed up with her husband is so chauvinistic, misogynistic, and she's almost like going through this mental health crisis, and then light spoilers here, she becomes a werewolf, and I have to kind of bring this up. I will be talking about spoilers basically here on out for the remaining like 3 issues that are in book 3, so 40 through 42. She almost tries to kill her husband, but she doesn't, because she wants to end her own life, and she impales herself on this like kitchen knife set at the supermarket, and she reforms back into like a human form, kind of this like naked woman who's then bleeding out, and Swamp Thing is there. And what's so interesting to me is that, you get the instances where Swamp Thing fights, and he's trying to prevent something, but in situations like this, ultimately what he can do is just watch things happen. He becomes the audience. He is a witness to the horror that he can't really do anything to prevent. And that's a very fascinating take on a superhero, or if Swamp Thing can be considered a superhero. He, again, is horrified to watch this woman do these, or just, from a former person of Swamp Thing to another person. He's just witnessing her kill herself. And then she says to him, "I don't want to die inside." please carry me outside so I can die outside. I don't want to die in the supermarket. Carry me outside. And then he does and leave. And that was an instance, yeah, where it's just one issue, is this one relatively self-contained story. But even I think, it's all, it all links to Constantine telling Swamp Thing, okay, go to Illinois, then go to Maine. And then Swamp Thing is like, all right, screw you, Constantine. I'm just going back home to Louisiana. While Constantine has already written in where he wants Swamp Thing to go next. And of course, Constantine says, go to Louisiana. And then we get into something that, again, we go from this almost gender horror, or more like gender role horror, or horror against standard gender roles. I don't even know what the hell you can call that, to then racial horror. The whole thing being set in Louisiana, we get a taste for the horror of slavery, in that there's this production company that wants to do a soap opera set on a cotton plantation in the South, before, decades before the Civil War. And it's almost like the corrupt spirits of the slave owners still exist in this place, and the need for the slaves who have died and are buried in the slave graveyard to then rise up and somehow obtain their freedom, because and they've just been kind of rotting in these graves, and they can't sleep. And that's one thing. It's like he couldn't sleep, even though that, I know, is the character that refers to is not, he was not a slave. But it was mystifying in such a horrific and in tragic way, where again, Swamp Thing does the things he can try to do to prevent it, but he can't quite shake them from their reverie until it's too late, until kind of this place is annihilated and it's destroyed, and he's just witnessing all of it. And Constantine, it's almost like Constantine wants him to view these terrible, terrible things. Not that Constantine is working like the hand of God or something, but part of me wonders that. Makes me very intrigued to see where this thing will continue to go in books 4, 5, and 6, the last 3 that are coming up here. So, man, Swamp Thing, book 3, if you've read it, let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you guys next time.